My husband laughed while signing our divorce papers until the judge started reading my financial statement. I'm Sarah, 29, and I'm sitting in a Nashville courtroom watching the man I've been married to for 6 years smirk like he's already won. Michael, charming lawyer from a wealthy family, always thought I was just some naive small-town girl who should be grateful he chose me. To him, I was a project, a trophy, a +1 who looked good at dinners but had no real ambition. What he didn't know was that while he was working late with his blonde coworker Amanda, I was quietly building something he couldn't even imagine. He thought I was the dependent wife who'd crumble without him. In reality, I was laying the foundation of my own empire, in secret, under his nose, every single day of our marriage. And now, in this courtroom, the moment is finally here. The judge is about to reveal numbers that will wipe that smug grin right off his face.
I wasn't always this woman sitting in a courtroom, waiting for my soon-to-be ex-husband to get what he deserves. A few years ago, I was just a girl from a small town in Tennessee who'd moved to Nashville with big dreams. I was studying accounting at Vanderbilt, working part-time at a small firm, and living on coffee and determination. That's when I met Michael. It was one of those movie moment meetings in a coffee shop. I was surrounded by textbooks, highlighters everywhere, and he walked up with the kind of confidence that only comes from being born into money. He leaned over my table, glanced at my notes, and said, "You have potential. You just need the right guidance." At the time, I thought it was flattering. Now, I realize it was a warning, a preview of our entire relationship. Michael was everything I thought I wanted. Handsome, ambitious, from a respected Nashville family of attorneys. He took me out to fancy restaurants I'd never been able to afford, whisked me away on weekend trips, made me feel like I was living in a dream. But even in the middle of all this champagne and designer dinners, he was already shaping me, criticizing my Target dresses, suggesting a more polished haircut, making snide comments about my college friends being limited. It felt like romance at first, but really, it was control disguised as love.
18 months later, he proposed in the most dramatic way possible. A weekend in Gatlinburg, a ring that probably cost more than my parents' house, champagne poured before I even said yes. Everyone in the restaurant applauded when I accepted. It felt like a fairy tale, and I let myself believe it was. Our wedding? I fought hard to keep it intimate in Savannah, Georgia. My choice, my dream. His family wanted a grand Nashville production with 300 guests and a country club reception. His mother, Margaret, never forgave me for choosing something small. I still remember her smile, tight as a corset, when she said, "At least it's respectable, even if it's simple." That was the first time I realized I'd never, truly, be good enough for the Shannons. After the honeymoon, reality set in fast. We moved into his sleek Belmead house, cold white walls, expensive furniture that looked like it belonged in a catalog, not a home. I tried adding personal touches, photos, plants, splashes of color. Every time, Michael would wrinkle his nose. "Too cluttered, too provincial," he'd say. Within months, I wasn't just his wife. I was his project. He questioned my clothes, my friends, my work. My accounting job, something I was proud of, was reduced to a little hobby. "Why work for pennies when I can give you everything you need?" he'd ask. But I didn't want his everything. I wanted my own. And that difference between us, it would only get sharper with time. The cracks started to show sooner than I ever admitted to myself. On the outside, we looked like the perfect couple. Attorney husband, pretty wife, big house in one of Nashville's wealthiest neighborhoods. Inside, though, it was a slow suffocation. Michael had always been particular about money, but marriage turned it into control. We had joint accounts, yet every purchase I made was questioned. "Did you really need another book on accounting? That's $150 wasted," he'd scold like I was a child.
Meanwhile, he thought nothing of dropping $5,000 on a new golf membership or adding another watch to his already ridiculous collection. Then came the isolation. Trips to see my parents in Tennessee became inconvenient. He'd always have a reason: a client dinner, a networking event, or just, why drag me to the middle of nowhere? My college friends drifted away after too many awkward evenings where Michael belittled them for not knowing the right wine or the right restaurants. Even my job became a battlefield. When I was offered a promotion, Michael didn't congratulate me. Instead, he asked if the modest salary increase was really worth taking more time away from our home. Translation: my career wasn't real to him. It was just a distraction until I could become the polished attorney's wife his family wanted. From the outside, I had everything: luxury, status, security. But on the inside, I was losing myself piece by piece. The girl who had once been proud of her independence was disappearing, and in her place stood the kind of woman Michael always wanted: silent, polished, and dependent. But here's the thing. I was watching, and I was learning.
It was around our third Christmas together when the mask really started to slip. At his family's annual gathering, his mother asked, loudly, in front of everyone, when we were going to give her grandchildren. Michael just smiled and smoothly changed the subject, like a politician, dodging a tough question. Later that night in the car, I brought it up. I'm ready whenever you are. We've talked about kids before. His response still rings in my ears. Children are a massive responsibility and expense. With your modest career, what exactly would you be contributing to their future? That was the moment something snapped inside me. He didn't just dismiss me as a partner, he dismissed me as a person. My salary, my career, my identity, all reduced to insignificant. I smiled and nodded in the moment, but I knew I couldn't keep living under his thumb. So I did something small, quiet, secret. I opened a separate bank account at a different bank, one Michael didn't know about. Each paycheck, I funneled a tiny portion, just enough that he wouldn't notice missing from our joint accounts. It wasn't much at first, but it was mine. And with that first deposit, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: control. I started reading books on investing. I took free online courses in business management late at night, the glow of my laptop hidden under the excuse of professional development. Every click, every page, every dollar saved was one more step out of his shadow. Michael thought he was molding me into the perfect dependent wife. What he didn't realize was that he was creating the woman who would one day destroy his illusion of control.
While Michael spent his late nights at the office, or so he claimed, I began building my own life in the shadows of our marriage. With the small savings in my secret account, I registered a business name: Sarah Mitchell Financial Solutions. Just a modest LLC, nothing flashy, but it was mine. I told Michael I needed a quiet place for continuing education, and he barely paid attention as I converted our unused guest bedroom into a small office. A desk, a secondhand printer, and a laptop were all I needed. He brushed it off as a cute hobby. "Just don't let it interfere with our social obligations," he said, kissing me on the cheek like I was a child playing pretend. My first real client came by accident. At a coffee shop, I overheard a woman stressing about her catering company's finances. I introduced myself, offered to help for a fraction of what big-name advisors charged, and to my shock, she agreed. Her name was Elena Rodriguez, and within weeks, I'd helped restructure her business so effectively she was saving thousands. She was thrilled. She referred me to 2 more small businesses almost immediately. That first success lit a fire in me. Suddenly, every late night Michael spent networking became my chance to work on client strategies. I learned to take calls from my closet with blankets stuffed under the door to block sound. I juggled spreadsheets while pretending to be asleep when he came home past midnight. It was exhausting, yes, but for the first time in years, I felt alive. Michael thought he was the only ambitious one in the marriage, but in reality, He had no idea he was sharing a house with a woman who was building an empire right under his nose. Elena's referrals turned into a steady stream of clients. First, it was other small businesses in her network, bakers, boutique owners, a landscaper struggling with cash flow. Then came bigger fish, a tech startup founder who needed help organizing her finances before pitching investors. I was terrified at first. I undercharged, I overpromised, I stayed up until 3 a.m. teaching myself skills on the fly. But each client left happier than they'd come, and word spread. Within a year, I had a portfolio solid enough to raise my rates. Michael, of course, didn't notice. If anything, he mistook my growing confidence for finally adapting to his world. "I'm glad you're settling into our lifestyle," he told me one night, sipping whiskey like some old money king. "You used to seem so overwhelmed. It's good you're learning." I bit my tongue and smiled. He had no clue that while he was busy impressing clients with overpriced wine, I was quietly building a consulting firm that was becoming too big to hide. The best part? Elena became more than my first client. She became my friend. Authentic, grounded, supportive in ways Michael never was. One day over coffee, she said, "You have a gift, Sarah. You don't just understand money, you understand people. Don't you dare let anyone tell you otherwise." For the first time in years, someone believed in me. And with every client, every dollar tucked away in my secret accounts, every late-night spreadsheet, so did I. Through Elena's network, I met Patricia Chen, a name I'd only heard whispered in Nashville's business circles. She was a serial entrepreneur who had sold her last company for 8 figures and was now starting a fintech venture. At first, she hired me for something small, cleaning up cash flow projections for a presentation. But Patricia was sharp. After just one meeting, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "You're charging way too little. Triple your rates. If you don't value your expertise, no one else will." I was terrified, but I listened. And she was right. When I raised my prices, instead of losing clients, I gained bigger ones. People who respected quality and were willing to pay for it. Patricia didn't just become a client. She became a mentor. She introduced me to circles Michael had no idea even existed. Angel investors, startup founders, women building real wealth on their own terms. Under her guidance, I started not just consulting, but investing. Small at first, but enough to watch my money multiply. Meanwhile, Michael thought my little projects were just keeping me busy while he climbed a law firm ladder. "I'm glad you have something to do during the day," he said once, scrolling through his phone without even looking at me. He had no idea I was managing portfolios worth more than his yearly bonus. For the first time since marrying him, I wasn't just surviving, I was building, quietly, strategically, and soon, inevitably, visibly. By our 4th year of marriage, my double life was in full swing. By day, I was the polished attorney's wife, attending firm dinners and smiling at all the right people. By night, I was running financial strategies from my closet office, my business quietly expanding beyond anything Michael could imagine. But while my world was growing, his attention to me was shrinking. Michael's late nights at the office became routine, Thursdays especially. Always big clients or emergency filings, always rolling in after 11 p.m. with excuses so smooth they sounded rehearsed. Then came the smell. Expensive perfume, light but unmistakable, clinging to his suit jacket. He waved it off with a laugh. "Networking, Sarah. Do you expect me to tell colleagues not to hug me goodbye?" I wanted to believe him, I really did. But then, one Thursday evening, his phone buzzed on the counter while he was in the shower. Just a preview on the lock screen. "Missing you already. Last night was..." from someone saved as A. My stomach dropped. I didn't confront him, not yet. Instead, I started watching, taking mental notes. The Thursdays that always ran late, the weekend conferences I could never find online, the client dinners always at the same upscale restaurant downtown. And then one night, I decided to stop wondering. I parked near that restaurant, my heart pounding as I waited. At 8:30, Michael's BMW pulled in. 10 minutes later, a red Mercedes parked right beside him. Out stepped Amanda Walsh, his blonde colleague from the firm. I watched them kiss in the parking lot before walking inside hand in hand. And in that moment, my marriage wasn't just broken, it was over. I gave them 30 minutes.
30 long, shaking minutes where I sat in my car staring at the restaurant doors, forcing myself not to cry, not to storm in too soon, not to lose control. My hands were clammy on the steering wheel, my phone camera still open with the photos I'd taken of them kissing in the parking lot. Proof. Cold, undeniable proof. Finally, I walked in. My heels felt heavier than they ever had, every step echoing in my ears. And there they were, Michael and Amanda, tucked into a corner booth, his hand over hers, leaning in like they were the only two people in the world. I stopped right at their table. Amanda froze, her face blanching as she tried to pull her hand back. Michael jerked up, shock flashing across his features before quickly morphing into irritation like I was the one interrupting him. "This explains the late nights," I said evenly, my voice steadier than I felt. Amanda stammered something about needing the restroom and practically bolted, leaving Michael alone to face me. He straightened his tie, that smooth lawyer mask sliding back into place. "Sarah, this isn't what it looks like." I laughed. Actually laughed. Really, because it looks exactly like dinner with your girlfriend while your wife eats alone at home. Other diners were starting to glance over, sensing the tension. Michael lowered his voice, leaning closer, eyes sharp. "Let's not make a scene. Sit down and we'll talk." But I didn't sit. I leaned down, close enough that only he could hear. "Don't worry, I'm not here to argue. I just wanted you to know," I held up my phone, showing him the photos of their kiss in the parking lot, "that I already have everything I need." Then I turned and walked out, leaving him with nothing but his unfinished glass of wine and the realization that, for the first time, he wasn't the one in control. Michael came home past midnight that night, the stench of whiskey and desperation clinging to him. I was sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of cold tea in front of me. He didn't even flinch when he saw me awake, just sighed like I was the inconvenience. "Sarah," he began, his voice soft, rehearsed. "I made a mistake. It was nothing serious, just physical. I'll end it." I stared at him. 6 years of marriage, and that was his excuse? Just physical? Then came the parade of promises. Counseling, a second honeymoon, flowers, date nights, whispered apologies that never quite reached his eyes. He even tried to flip it on me. "You've been so wrapped up in your little accounting projects. You've become boring, Sarah. When was the last time you made an effort in this marriage?" That one almost made me laugh. Almost. But instead of screaming, I nodded. "I need time," I told him. And that was the first time in years I said something completely true to his face, because I did need time. Just not to forgive him. I needed time to plan. Behind his back, I started meeting with attorneys disguised as client consultations. Through Patricia, I was introduced to Rebecca Torres, one of the toughest divorce lawyers in Nashville. She didn't sugarcoat a thing. Tennessee is an equitable distribution state. Without a prenup, the court will divide assets as they see fair, but fair doesn't mean equal. Document everything. Knowledge is power. I walked out of her office with a folder full of legal advice, a heart pounding with adrenaline, and a single thought burning in my mind. Michael thought he had trapped me. What he didn't know was that I was already building the escape hatch, and when I walked through it, I wouldn't just leave. I'd take back everything he tried to strip from me. For weeks, I played the role of the wounded but forgiving wife. I let him think his flowers mattered, that his half-hearted date nights were working. On the surface, I was quiet, compliant, even soft. Behind the scenes, I was copying every bank statement, every investment record, every hidden account I already knew about. Then I slipped up. Just once. One evening, I'd forgotten to use private browsing on our shared computer. I left a single tab in my history: Tennessee Divorce Asset Division Process. The next day, Michael stormed into the kitchen waving a screenshot on his phone like a weapon. "Is this what you've been doing? Planning to divorce me? To take my money?" His face was crimson, a vein in his forehead pulsing so hard I thought it might burst. I stayed calm, forcing my hands not to tremble as I set down my coffee mug. "I was curious, Michael. After what you did, wouldn't you be curious too? He stared at me, nostrils flaring, then leaned in so close I could smell the bitterness of his coffee. Let me make something clear. You'll have nothing without me. Nothing. My family's lawyers will bury you. You'll be lucky to afford a trailer park by the time I'm done with you. I held his gaze, not blinking, and for the first time, I saw it, the fear behind his anger. He was bluffing. He thought threats would send me running back into London like they always had. That night, I moved everything important, business documents, contracts, client lists, to encrypted cloud storage and a safety deposit box he didn't know existed. Michael wanted me scared. Instead, he gave me clarity. His threats weren't a warning shot, they were confirmation. It was war now. 3 weeks later, I was reorganizing the closet when I found it. Tucked inside one of Michael's dress shoes was a folded receipt. Tiffany & Co. A diamond tennis bracelet. Price? $11,850. The date on the slip? 2 months earlier. I stared at it for a long time, my hands trembling, not from heartbreak, but from rage. Michael had always scrutinized my book purchases, my professional courses, asking if they were worth the expense. Yet here he was, casually dropping nearly $12,000 on her. Before I could even process the betrayal, I heard the front door open. Voices. Michael and a woman's laugh. Amanda. I froze, still clutching the receipt, as they walked into the bedroom. They hadn't expected me home in the middle of the day. I stepped out of the closet, and there they were, standing at the foot of our bed, his hands on her waist, hers tangled in his tie. Sarah. Michael didn't even step away from her. His voice was calm, almost annoyed. Well, this saves me a difficult conversation. I want a divorce. Amanda and I are planning a future together. No apology, no shame, just arrogance, like he was granting me a favor. And right there in our bedroom, Michael Shannon made the biggest mistake of his life, assuming I was the powerless one in this marriage. The next day, Michael packed most of his clothes and personal items, leaving our house half empty. By evening, his lawyer had already emailed me a generous settlement offer. A one-time payment of $50,000, 6 months of living expenses. In return, I would forfeit any claim to the house, our investments, even the furniture we had chosen together. Rebecca, my attorney, smirked when she read it. He's testing the waters. He assumes you're naive, that you'll panic and take the first thing he throws at you. This isn't an offer, it's an insult. I officially rejected it. And with that, we triggered financial disclosure, a legal process forcing both of us to disclose all assets. Michael hated it. His lawyer delayed, stalled, obfuscated, but Rebecca was relentless. What Michael didn't know was that I wasn't depending on his disclosures. For years, I'd tracked our finances meticulously. Every account, every transfer, every suspicious expense. I already had a paper trail longer than his ego. And while his legal team worked overtime to paint me as a failed little housewife, my consulting firm was quietly hitting milestones he couldn't even fathom. 6-figure contracts, a downtown office lease, investments multiplying under my management. Michael thought he was fighting a small-town girl grasping for scraps. In reality, he was up against a woman who had been building an empire right under his nose. And soon, in a courtroom full of witnesses, he was going to find out exactly how wrong he was. When the financial tactics didn't scare me, Michael switched to something more personal. The invitations to social events dried up almost overnight. Friends I'd once spent holidays with suddenly weren't returning my calls. Neighbors who used to wave and chat now barely made eye contact. It didn't take long to figure out why. Michael was telling everyone I had cheated on him, that I was unstable, that he was divorcing me despite doing everything in his power to save the marriage. And in the circles where his family name carried weight, his word was gospel. The isolation cut deeper than I expected. These were people I'd cooked for, celebrated with, shared secrets with. Now they looked at me like I was toxic. Except for two. Elena and Patricia. Elena shoved a box of pastries into my hands one night after I broke down in her catering kitchen. People who believe gossip without hearing your side aren't worth your energy. Let them go. Focus on building your new life. Patricia was even blunter. Sarah, stop mourning a world that was never yours to begin with. Michael's people were never your people. You're outgrowing them. That's a good thing. But Michael wasn't done. Late night calls started, his voice sharp, threatening. If you don't take my deal, I'll make sure you never work in the city again. Another time, maybe I should have your business audited, but there are some tax regularities in that little side hustle. I didn't even flinch. My records were cleaner than his conscience, and I knew it. And then his mother called, Margaret Shannon. Her voice dripped with that same icy disdain I'd felt since the day we met. Sarah, don't make this ugly. Take what's being offered and move on with dignity. We always knew you weren't right for Michael. I bit my tongue, smiled through the phone, and said calmly, Thank you for your concern, Margaret, but I'll be guided by my attorney's advice. When I hung up, I realized something. Michael was fighting like a man desperate to protect his castle. But I wasn't storming the gates. I was already building my own kingdom. While Michael spent his nights whispering to Amanda and bragging to his friends about the easy win he'd have in court, I was building something far bigger than he could imagine. My consulting firm, which had started with late-night calls in a closet lined with blankets, was now running out of a proper office space in downtown Nashville. The day I signed the lease, I walked through the glass doors and let myself feel the weight of it. This wasn't a hobby. It wasn't a side project. It was an empire in the making. Within months, I had hired 4 employees, a junior consultant, a financial analyst, a marketing coordinator, and a part-time assistant. I paid them well, treated them with respect, and watched them believe in me in a way Michael never had. And the clients kept coming. Elena's catering business had turned into a case study I could show potential clients. And through Patricia's network, I landed contracts with 2 regional chains on the verge of bankruptcy. After my restructuring plans, both businesses not only survived, but tripled their profits. One morning, Patricia looked at me over coffee and said, Sarah, you're undercharging. Triple your rates. I was terrified, but she was right. The higher my rates went, the more seriously people took me. Soon, I was working with a tech startup, a retail chain, and even a healthcare provider. My consulting wasn't just saving businesses, it was making them millions. Every dollar I earned, I reinvested. Some went into software and certifications, some into strategic investments, real estate, emerging startups, stocks I knew would rise. My portfolio grew faster than I could have dreamed. Meanwhile, Michael was still laughing at dinner parties, telling everyone I was dabbling in accounting to pass the time. He had no idea that his naive, small-town wife was quietly becoming a millionaire. And I wasn't done yet. The real turning point came when one of my clients, a young tech founder I'd helped restructure before her funding round, was featured in a Nashville business magazine. The article praised her company's comeback, calling it one of the smartest financial turnarounds of the year. I wasn't mentioned by name at my request, but insiders knew. Within weeks, I had emails from CEOs, entrepreneurs, and investors asking if I was the mystery consultant behind the success. Through Patricia, I was introduced to a group of angel investors. They were scouting for startups with real potential, and my financial models caught their attention. For the first time, I wasn't just consulting, I was investing. Small at first, then larger. Technology, real estate, even a fintech startup Patricia herself was launching. Cash sitting in a savings account is wasted potential, Patricia told me one night over wine. Make your money work harder than you do. I listened, and my investments exploded. Within 6 months, my portfolio had grown into the millions. Meanwhile, Michael's world was shrinking. His lawyer kept delaying discovery, hoping I'd cave. He was hiding accounts, undervaluing stocks, even claiming separate property that I knew for a fact had been purchased with marital funds. Rebecca documented everything with the precision of a surgeon. Michael thought he was clever. He thought I was in the dark. But every time he lied, Every time he smirked across the courtroom like he had already won, I smiled inside, because I knew something he didn't. When the judge finally read my financial statement, his entire empire of arrogance was going to collapse.
The morning of the final hearing felt surreal. The sky over Nashville was sharp and clear, like even the weather knew it was Judgment Day. I wore a needy suit, conservative, sharp, deliberate. Around my neck was a small diamond pendant Elena and Patricia had gifted me. Your Independence Diamond, they had called it. When I entered the courthouse, Michael was already there. Tailored charcoal suit, hair perfect, that same smug grin plastered across his face. He leaned in toward his lawyer, David Harrison, one of the city's most aggressive divorce attorneys, and whispered something that made them both chuckle. To him, this was a formality, a show, a chance to watch me squirm. Rebecca, my attorney, arrived moments later. Unlike David, who had a swarm of junior associates carrying his files, Rebecca carried her own briefcase, calm and composed. She simply asked me, "Ready?" "More than ready," I said. Inside the courtroom, Judge Catherine Williams presided. She was known for being fair, but ruthless when it came to dishonesty. Her silver hair was pulled into a no-nonsense bun, and her gaze was sharp enough to cut steel. Michael went first. His testimony was polished, almost theatrical. He painted himself as the devoted husband who had supported my little career out of love, only to be met with betrayal and greed. "I've offered Mrs. Shannon a generous settlement," he said, his voice carefully modulated. "Enough for her to live comfortably while she rebuilds her modest career." David followed up with dramatic arguments that Michael's family wealth was separate, that I had contributed virtually nothing, that the house should remain his, that I was trying to take advantage of his generosity. And then, as if to twist the knife, when it came time to sign the first round of divorce papers, Michael laughed out loud. He laughed, signed them with a flourish, leaned close enough to whisper, "Enjoy going back to your parents' farm." Rebecca didn't react, neither did I. We had been waiting for this exact moment, because soon the judge would see the truth, and Michael's laugh would be the last one he ever got at my expense. "Your Honor," she began, her voice crisp, "Mr. Shannon has not been forthcoming about the full scope of his marital assets. We have documented evidence of undisclosed accounts, hidden transfers, and lavish spending on extramarital partners. The credibility of his financial disclosures is, at best, questionable." David jumped up, objecting, but Judge Williams raised a hand. "Sit down, counselor. I want to hear this." Rebecca continued, methodically presenting exhibits, statements, receipts, transfers. Each document was a nail in Michael's coffin. I watched him shift in his chair, the smugness draining from his face. And then Rebecca turned to the ace we had been holding back. "Furthermore, Your Honor, we request the court consider Mrs. Shannon's separate property, specifically the business she built without a single dollar of contribution from Mr. Shannon. We submit her complete financial statement." The clerk handed Judge Williams the sealed envelope we had guarded like treasure. The room was silent, except for the sound of paper being unfolded. The judge's eyebrows rose slightly as she read. Then she spoke, her voice carrying through the courtroom. "Sarah Mitchell Financial Solutions. Current valuation, $2.1 million. The air shifted. Michael snapped his head toward me, disbelief painted across his face. "Investment portfolio, including technology stocks, real estate, and startup equity, $11.9 million. David's jaw dropped. Michael gripped the table so hard his knuckles turned white. "Real estate holdings, 2 properties, $1.2 million. By now, Michael's face was pale, sweat glistening on his forehead. Amanda, sitting in the gallery, slipped out quietly without looking back. "Total assets disclosed, $15.2 million. The silence was suffocating. "Mr. Shannon," she said, looking directly at him, "do you wish to revise your previous statements regarding your wife's supposed financial dependence?" Michael opened his mouth, but no sound came out. For the first time in our entire marriage, he had nothing to say. And in that silence, I felt it. The shift, the power, the justice. The man who laughed as he signed my divorce papers now sat frozen, his entire illusion of superiority shattered.
Judge Williams took a long pause, flipping through the final pages of Rebecca's documentation. The courtroom was silent, thick with tension. Finally, she looked up. Based on the prenuptial agreement, Clause 15 clearly states that any business venture established independently remains the separate property of its founder. Mrs. Shannon's company and investment portfolio belong solely to her. Michael made a choking sound, half gasp, half protest. His lawyer tried to recover, but the judge's voice cut through like steel. Furthermore, due to Mr. Shannon's repeated failure to disclose assets in good faith, the court will grant a disproportionate share of the remaining marital property to Mrs. Shannon. The home shall be sold, with proceeds divided at 60-40 in her favor. Additional marital accounts will also be awarded accordingly. The gavel came down. It was over. Michael staggered to his feet, his face a mask of disbelief and rage. "You planned this," he hissed at me, as Rebecca guided me away. "You waited years just to destroy me." I looked at him one last time. The man I had once thought was my future, now reduced to nothing more than an angry shadow of himself. "No, Michael," I said calmly. "I built something while you were busy tearing us apart. That's the difference between us." As I stepped out of the courtroom, the crisp Nashville air hit me like a baptism. The weight I'd carried for 6 years dissolved with every step down those marble stairs. Today, I live in a penthouse I bought under my own name. My company has expanded nationally and is on the verge of going global. I've started a foundation to help women gain financial independence, so no one ever has to feel as trapped as I once did. And Michael? Last I heard, Amanda left him when the money dried up. He tried to come crawling back, but I didn't even bother to respond. Because the truth is, this wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the beginning of me. For the first time in years, I'm free. And I didn't just survive him, I became everything he told me I could never be. The man who laughed as he signed my divorce papers now sat frozen, his entire illusion of superiority shattered.